Right. Okay. Let's see how we get on. So this is the last practice I worked at. I did have a spell working in the hospital for about a year. Well, only doing a day and supervising. But I moved here, or rather, I bought the practice, or rather, I bought the house, which is a semi-detached house in 1995, basically because I wanted to continue doing NHS work, predominantly NHS work, and my partners didn't. So, what's it called? When your values differ that far, then it's tricky. So I spent a year. I think I was sent, the saying is you're sent to Coventry, but it wasn't a great year because, actually what they wanted me to do was to move to North Wales, which I was going to do, but they didn't want to pay me any money for my share of the practice that clearly I'd spent a lot of money when I bought in. But that's another story. So while people say this is business, it's just business. Often it's not. It's just being greedy, so and so. And anyway, so it worked out really well. I mean, it was a struggle, but so from the semi-detached house in the year, we had the extension built, which housed one surgery, and then we had 3 other surgeries in the original house, and a small, very small office. And I have to say, I was really happy there, and I spent a lot of time fiddling around. Just working, fiddling around, designing I designed all the surgeries with the suction, the cables, the water, all that. I didn't put it in, but I designed it, and it was great fun. And clearly I'd done it before in different places, but that was it. And then, so what actually then happened was, and this is 10 years later, because we were working with the health service and we were doing well and we were training practice, the NHS said, well, they'd go halves for us to extend the practice. And they go halves on the capital fee, which we never received, because by the time it was completed, they said they'd run out of funds, and the date 2006, and they wouldn't increase our UDA allowance. So that's when we started to go bankrupt. No thanks to the NHS. And in the end, you can't really blame the manager, because it wasn't his fault. It was someone else asked him to do it, and above him was another manager that asked him to do it, and then above them there's in a huge bureaucracy, no one realizes what's going on. And this was a disaster for us. And if we'd have gone bust, it was a disaster for the community. But in the end, we got it to work. So one of the, I try out different things because of that. And one of them we'll come to, which was, he had what was called a lot of white space. And with the white space, I bought a CEREC machine. These are pictures of more recent pictures before I left, and there it shows the arrows pointing at the screen above the patient's chair. I think we were really early adopters, as you would say. We had digital X-rays. Initially, it was a DIR Vista scan, I think, and also a variety of intraoral cameras, and some were Wi-Fi. But when people got iPhones, they started being unreliable, so we went back to a cable one. And you'll see from the photos I've taken, I just used to take a quick photo, show the patient on the screen. However, now you see some photos of things, and I think that, I should never show them. But actually I should. Lots of the times at these lectures, you just see someone's best work. And I know from experience that a lot of the stuff that we see, they hide probably twice as much. There are some fantastic clinicians out there. With the advent of Instagram, everyone thinks everyone does fantastic work. The vast majority do very good work. We just need to be realistic in what we're trying to achieve, certainly within the health service. And so there you can see my ozone machine, and the diagonodent next to it, bottom right, that little one next to the pale blue thing is a diagonodent. And that was a great bit of kit, especially for trying to, get teenagers on the way, or certainly young children, to try and avoid them having any decay. So that was my surgery. Spent a lot of time there with Denise. I think Denise I think we just started the practice, but Denise certainly worked with me for at least 19 years. And we worked in the previous room for about 10, and then this one. And we were a great team. As I would say, she was a fantastic nurse. I'm definitely above average dentist. If the roles had been reversed, she may have made a half decent dentist. I'd have been a terrible nurse. But anyway, we had a great career, both of us, I think. And yeah, and this is more pictures of the surgery. Yeah, and this is like COVID time, by which time I'd sold the business. So originally we sold it to one corporate, and then that corporate got bought out by another corporate 3 years later. And I had a bit of a run-in with the corporate in the first one, in that they didn't like my ideas on prevention. Basically they tried to wriggle out of paying what was the payments, because they moved the staff so we weren't going to hit our target. Things people do. You think, really? Anyway, I met the manager, because I met the manager of the corporate. He came to see me and give me the constructive dismissal letter and said I better behave. And so I have. And that corporate then did what he said they were going to do. They sold after 3 years to a different corporate, and they sold it for twice as much as the original corporate bought from me. And then the other corporate was even worse. You see, it's a changing on the different computers. So this is on my laptop, which is about to blow up. Anyway, let's carry on. Oh, and the garden. The garden it was great to look out in the garden. Always had the windows open. And this is me retiring. And yeah, I mean, my spelling's terrible. And that date on that's wrong. I left in 2020. It's definitely 3 years, but it doesn't feel like 3 years since I finished. And unlike when I went on holiday, I think I could probably go back tomorrow. My note keeping wouldn't be any better, but I could go back tomorrow. And as you can see, lots of healthy snacks there. And there's a bottle of wine. Ooh, naughty. And this is some of the things that I was reading. I think that and what we need to do, and this is partly this in a way, is that we need to, you learn more from your mistakes than you do from your success. And let's not kid ourselves that everything we do is fantastic. The things I really was impressed by were acid etch bridges, Maryland bridges, as we call them. So I would have said about an interesting story about that in the past. And yeah, do no harm. I'm still trying to remember the name of the doctor that did that, but he was a brain surgeon. And as they always say, I mean, to be fair, he knew his stuff. But what I had years ago was what was a die-core crown. And you were meant to, this material you were meant to use instead of the bonded porcelain that we all used to use. But I had failures with them. And I thought it was me. I thought it was probably lousy prep or something like that, not enough clearance. It was probably a combination, but all die-core crowns fractured. There was an inherent problem with the processing of it. And many years later, with my CEREC machine, it was the same material, which is a kind of a hybrid material. Because it was milled rather than put through a furnace, they work, and they work extremely well. It just took a while to come along. And yeah, if we'd have had Facebook back then, I could have gone on Dentist for Dentists and said, oh, I'm having problems with this today, this crown fractured. And then everyone else would hopefully have popped up saying, I've got the same issue. And that's how we learn. We need to talk to one another. And this was during COVID. So why aren't we doing teledentistry anymore? We could instruct, this was the idea that I had to get parents to apply a bit of fluoride to the children's teeth. Every time they come in, you dab a little bit on the sixes. Well, because that's what we're told to do. And there's some science behind it. As everyone else points out, it would have been far better if we'd have disclosed the patient and gone through oral hygiene instruction, and that I had a PDU in the practice to do that. But the reality is, within the health service, it's a lot quicker to put a bit of fluoride on the 6 molars than it is to disclose them point out where they're not cleaning them. It's a bit of a mare, really. Anyway, I'm trying to do teledentistry now, putting it into my next app. Hopefully, if I can find some people who are keen in this country, and if not, I'm sure they got them in Portugal. Their English is probably better than mine, actually. Anyway, we also did this, is you sometimes think when you go on a course, do you hear the right thing? So, as I said, back in 1985, 86, I was working in practice that was really big on occlusion. Look at Pankey, they're still going. Apparently, Mr. Pankey got fed up taking out teeth and said he'd never take out another tooth. And that's when he started doing occlusion. They also were very big against taking out first premolars to alleviate crowding. There are lots of things. I mean, they're all different sort of niches, and Pankey's one of them. And I made a lot of these Tanner appliances myself from the models, adjusted them in the mouth. God, it was hard work, just to get the perfect occlusion, or rather, the perfect occlusion against the Tanner appliance to help people with their bruxism and wear. And I think when you know how to do these things, you find out everyone has an occlusal problem, but not everybody does. In fact, I think the whole thing about occlusion is definitely oversold. I think it's very important when you come to looking at implants. Actually, more recently, I thought, oh, that's interesting. But the vast majority of people are quite happy with their occlusion. And the course that I went on, which was a 2-day course many years ago, so he's getting all the contact points, the excursions, the protrusions, getting all those things that I'd been doing on my Tanner. And then you make the crowns from, what you wax up and everything like that. And then the chap said, well, we guarantee all our work as long as you wear a suck down appliance. Well, that made no sense at all. And actually, I didn't make, I think I made about 2 Tanners or similar in later years. I used to always make these soft night guards, and if people wore through them, which was extremely rare, just make another one. It saved an awful lot of time. This was the other thing I was keen on, and a patient of mine kept coming in saying, have I tried ozone? Have I tried ozone? Because you can sterilize the teeth. And I thought, I've never heard of that. And also he did say, but the problem is ozone is toxic. Oh, maybe it's toxic as mercury. There we go. Anyway, this machine came out, and I contacted him. I said, this machine's come out, Heal Ozone, and they're doing a demonstration in Cardiff. So he said, I'll take you there. So we went. So I went with my patient to Cardiff. And while I was quizzing the clinicians, and to be honest, their research that they were about to produce was not good. You knew it wasn't good, but the principle was good. But patient Gary, he had a look at the machine, kind of pulled it apart a bit, and he said, well, it's amazing, but it does what it says. It's able to apply ozone onto the tooth, but not into the mouth. And so I got the machine, and I think I had good success with it. But you don't know, the research, I don't know. So that's my ozone machine. The most important thing there is not the diagonodent, which was great because it'd make a noise. The higher the figure, the more likely the decay. So if you were lucky, if you were cleaning out a fissure that had a number, say, of 25, and you'd just smooth it out with your turbine. Oops. So I haven't been rudely interrupted by the tea lady, commonly called my wife. Where was I? Yeah, the diagonodent. As the readings went up, the noise went up, and you could see the children's eyes light up, not in a good way. And so I played around with this machine for a lot. And as I was just going to say, the best digital device there was not the diagonodent or the Helozone. It's the radio. I always had the radio on, and at 10:30, Popmaster. Yeah, I always found something else to do around 10:30 with my turbine. Never got a good score. But these are my results for ozone, or one of them. So This particular one was not for the tooth, it was for the soft tissue. And this lady had angular cheilitis. Terrible. It was really sore. Now, this is one of those things is I don't know if this worked or not. She said she thought it worked. And if you say something in a positive manner, people tend to believe you. It did work for cold sores for sure. I'd say it was 70% successful on the first attempt and more or less 100% successful if you applied it a second time. So, you know, it did work for different things. And there you can see how well, my notes, you know, I don't think you get away with it now. But yeah, the diagonodent reading, all under 19, good oral hygiene. I wouldn't have used ozone on them. Oh, you can see what I said. If it was 25, I'd use ozone and seal it. If it was 30, I'd open it up, use the ozone again. Use the ozone every time, actually. And if it got too big, I'd put glass ionomer in. And if it was relatively small and the figures were going down, then I'd do a composite sealant. I think the thing about Wi-Fi, what was that about? I think it might have been that they brought out a new diagonodent pen. And talking to technicians, they said they were worse for the very same reason that my intraoral camera got worse, is because it got interfered with people's signals on their smartphones that had started to come in. And so the cables on the diagonal one don't work better, as did the intraoral cameras connected via a USB. This chap's the guy that I went to the course on ozone with, and if you look him up on LinkedIn, he's still there. He's still working like me. He's still interested. Bizarrely, yeah. And he's traveling all over the world. I'm still in my shed. Actually, not in a shed. I'm in my room now. But yeah, I think if you want to enjoy work, you have to get interested. Anyway, ozone destroys prions. So if you could apply ozone to your equipment, as long as it got through, and let's be honest, the dishwashers never got rid of the debris where the prions would be hiding. So everyone knew they were a waste of time. But government legislation said you had to have them, when we'd have been far better off with ultrasonic baths, big thick gloves, cleaning. And I'm still not 100% sure what the outcome was with regards to prions. I mean, to be honest, lots of people should be running around with CJD now. Thank God they aren't, but I don't think it's anything to do with the dishwashers. But one advantage was that people started looking into using different types of files and different instrumentation for root filling. So you've now got wave one, which was a consequence of this. So some disasters or concerns do bring positive results. And using these nickel titanium files in your reduction handpiece have improved the endodontic results. Fantastic. It's just a shame we don't do more of them, because we've got lawyers in the background who make things difficult. And this one is, oh yeah, I went to the Wellcome Institute for some reason to look up research on ozone and sterilization. And actually what I did find out is this ozone sterilizer, yeah, the TS03. The interesting part here was, this is the only website that I ever went on where I was the #1 visitor. And so what happened was that it was an ozone gas and the sterilizing as a normal sterilizer. So that would destroy prions. They're quite big machines. Obviously, they never took off here. But I think ozone's used quite a lot in Germany for, infections, or certainly skin infections. And maybe we should go back there looking for that. Yeah, it's also used to disinfect airlines, because the cabins can be pressurized. So by the same token, you put ozone in them. Anyway, this you just sometimes have to think a little bit. Oh, and this is yeah, this gets me every time. Yeah, so I shouldn't have put this slide in really, but actually, when it comes to innovation, it applies always. And I was told at 37 that I needed both my hips replaced. And for someone who really liked playing football. This was a disaster. So I decided to stop playing football, and I decided to stop running because actually I could only ever run on grass because it hurt when I ran on the road. And this was why I had severe osteoarthritis in both my hips. And the guy said, you can have it done tomorrow if they're that painful. He did say that if you have a hip replacement, in 5 years, you'll be in a wheelchair. So I decided against that. Not learned how to swim, but I just stopped doing my squash, my football, and my running, and started cycling, played tennis, didn't give up skiing. So the interesting part here was it took 6 weeks to heal up. And those pictures are after I had my right hip done. I went to Paris on the 6th weekend. And after I had my left one done, which is a couple of months later, I went to Berlin and was able to walk around Berlin. And the interesting part was that this is innovation. And the chap that saw me, Everett Smith in Southmead, was fantastic. But he'd heard that dentists were putting in implants and weren't cementing them in. And so he thought that I knew a lot about osseointegration from implants work. Well, I never did any because I didn't think my patients could afford them. My partner did. He ended up doing them all. And yes, so the only time I got queasy was I just used to chat along, like if I knew what I was talking about. And then his registrar, after I had the operation, said, would I like to see my x-ray? And I said, oh, yes, please. And then when I looked at it, I thought, I wonder how they managed to put the pin in, because I used to struggle putting stay-block pins in. I mean, now we just use grooves if you use amalgam at all, or you can bond it in and all that. But yeah, that's why the scar on my legs were so big. You realize your legs somewhere else. And unfortunately, these aren't done so often now because they're difficult. But then if you have the training, then they're not so difficult. It's a chicken and egg situation. But of course, what happened, I think 1 or 2 went wrong and the hospital got sued. So the administrators meant you couldn't do it. I'd have quite happily signed a disclaimer saying if it doesn't work, I won't sue the hospital. And that's what we should do for dentistry, especially if it's in the health service. All right. So, yeah, this is, I think I said before, when things go wrong, you have to adapt. The NHS made me nearly go bankrupt, and I had what you could term a lot of white space. And so this is how I ended up with my CEREC machine. I was going to get, I looked at, for the same price, you could get a tattoo removal kind of kit called Eclipse or Ellipse or something like that, which is a very similar price. Anyway, yeah, I saw sense and I bought some dental equipment. So I'll finish here and I'll do the next one there. So that's might be about 20 minutes.